Okay, next problem we're going to look at is number 101 out of our assignment. I'll look at the directions first. It gives us this function h of t. It's an x cubed function, which means it crosses up to 3 times. It says use a zero or root feature of a graphing calculator to approximate accurate to the nearest thousandth of zeros. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use trace at this point just to give us a guideline. To be honest with you, my real goal is B and C. So I'm going to use a calculator to help me. I'm going to look at the graph. I'm going to make some estimates. I'm going to use a calculator to test them. We'll end up ultimately refining this as we go. So to start this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph my x cubed minus 2x squared minus 7x plus 2. So I put that into my graphing calculator. I'm going to hit zoom 6 to set a standard window, which is a negative 10 by 10 window. So if you haven't done that, do so. When I hit graph, it's going to look something like this, and I'll just kind of take you through the steps. Once I have that entered into the function like I have here, I'm going to touch graph. You see something looks like that. I'm going to hit the trace button. And then if I use my left arrow, I can actually follow along that curve to estimate that value. Now that's the only one that looks like it's close to an exact number. So I thought, oh, it's negative 2. So I put 2 in, and it came up x equal 2. Why I put 2 in, I have no idea. But you'll find 2 gives me a y value of negative 12, which is definitely not what I'm looking for. So then I changed that to negative 2, and it gave me 0. So that confirmed that negative 2, 0 was a y value. Now the other two look like they're in between 0 and 1. You know, if you look in here, a fraction and another fraction. So I'm going to say let's avoid those at this moment. Okay, so the next thing I would do then is, now that I know that 2, 0 is a specific value, then I would take and, like I've done here, use synthetic division, or excuse me, negative 2, 0 is a specific value. I'd use synthetic division to divide out negative 2. Sorry, like I have right in here. I've done my division. I confirmed that that y value was 0. That's the y value, remember? So that gave me x squared minus 4x plus 1. The way I got the x squared is it started out an x cubed. I took out an x. That brought me down to an x squared, and then an x, and then a constant with no remainder. So I have x squared minus 4x plus 1. I'm not going to, it won't even factor. There's no way I'm going to factor. So I use quadratic formula. It's a great tool. And I found, specifically using quadratic formula, that it is definitely not a nice neat value. I divided that each side by 2, or each part by 2, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 radical 3 over 2 is just radical 3. So 2 plus or minus radical 3. So, similar to one of the other examples, I then could express my 3 zeros as x equal negative 2, x equal 2 plus radical 3, and x equal 2 minus radical 3. And the reason I want to express them that way is because ultimately they ask for linear factorization or the linear factors. So if x equals negative 2, if I take that negative 2 to the other side, I get x plus 2 as a factor. So that's one of the 3 linear factors of that x cubed term. Now, unlike what you've done probably in previous years, when you have an irrational number like 2 plus radical 3, something that doesn't have a nice, neat value, okay, then I'm going to take the 2 over to make that x minus 2, and I'm going to take the square root of 3 over to make that a negative radical 3, and that would be my second factor. And then similarly, x minus 2 plus radical 3 would give me my third factor. So if you take an x times an x times an x, you get a positive x cubed. That seems to match with my original. And you can actually go and fill in 2 plus radical 3 into your function on your trace, just like we did the negative 2, and it should give you 0. Now, it may give you an estimate because it's an irrational number. May kind of round it funny, but it should technically give you 0 as a value. So there you go. That should give you 3 solid examples to work from on the assignment. See you tomorrow.